Hello everyone, this is CounterYolo bringing you another video in Star Trek Online. And in today's video, what I'm actually going to be talking about is cheaper console alternatives to some of the more popular and generally a lot more expensive or exclusive consoles inside of the game. We do have the camera recruitment event about to start this week on PC, so I will do also some comments about that as well, and how I personally feel about the new Veteran Destroyer for Jem'Hadar captains. I also have to talk about one little snippet from the notes of the patch notes for today on PC and what that might mean for us going forward. Feel free to see the times in the description if you'd like to skip around throughout this video. So generally for a lot of the consoles inside the game, what it really comes down to is that a lot of people in the DPS community basically use the exact same consoles for every build. The variance basically comes into well, how many tactical consoles does this starship have? If it's only got 3, then I've got to be a little bit more creative in my consoles. If it's 5 or 6, then well, I just fill the rest with my standard of whatever 5 or 6 consoles that it typically ends up being for each general energy and torpedo type in the game. Because of this, well, when a lot of these people are talking with those that are newer to the game, a lot of their tips and tricks really aren't that helpful in creating more affordable builds. Now, I'm not going to say that this is by any means budget in any sense of the word. A lot of this stuff is going to be from the C store, so a lot of these consoles are still going to be 3,000 Zen. So this isn't particularly cheap, but this is more of something that's more cheap than what you would get off of the exchange for a lot of these consoles, especially on the Federation side. And also, if it's a C-store purchase, it's also account unlock, which is better than a lot of these consoles that are technically more powerful but are single character unlock, which is pretty unfortunate. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. And we're going to start with number 10 in this list, which is going to be the Prayers World Defense Satellite. This was from my featured TFO event in April. We'll talk more about how this could potentially be obtainable for a lot of you all at the end of this video, but basically, if you didn't participate in this event, to my understanding, there is not a current way to get this at all, which is kind of sad. But if you do have access to this thing and don't have a lot of the extreme high-end consoles in the game, this is an extremely solid filler console, essentially. It gives you some direct energy damage, and it gives you a lot of power cost reduction. That power cost reduction is where, in my opinion, the main value of this console comes from. There aren't a lot of sources of that in consoles in the game. I mean, there's the Morphogenetic Matrix controller, but again, that's a tactical console, and mainly if you aren't doing Polaron, you probably shouldn't be using that one anyway. So for me, for the alternative here, I felt that the Enhanced Weapon System Efficiency set was the best equivalent to it, because the two-piece does give you weapon power cost reduction equivalent to what this does, but you're stuck using 2 consoles instead of 1, and this is only available to be used on Warbirds for this particular 2-piece set. It is 4,000 Zen because we have a console from the Morgu and a console from the Valdor. Now the Morgu, a lot of people will probably buy this anyway nowadays, especially if you're just starting Star Trek Online and are looking into buying C-store starships, because this ship already has an extremely strong starship trait called Emergency Weapon Cycle, which is a staple DPS trait nowadays for most builds inside of the game besides exotic torpedo type builds. So, like, its console is pretty lackluster. It's really just there for the 2-piece bonus. The Shield frequency generator is from the Valdor. It's only 1,000 Zen, and it's a very valuable console on its own too for survival. Yeah, the 2-piece there gives you a 25% weapon power cost reduction, which is pretty close to equivalent, but it takes 2 consoles to kind of to get that effect. There are a couple of other combos out there where you can use the Morphogenetic Matrix controller, or just use a Fleet Spire Warp Core as well to get that power cost reduction that you're probably going to be wanting. especially if you're going to use a beam overload build that requires a little bit more power, cost reduction to make it work well. This is something that you might want to consider. Our number 9 and number 8 are going to be done at the same time because these are both static consoles that are from the lobi store. For a long time, these have been extremely popular in DPS builds. The Taiko-Kinetic Converter isn't particularly as common as it used to be. Bio-neural infusion circuits, however, is basically in every DPS build out there. It's, to my understanding, it is the console that gives you the most crit severity out of any console inside of the game. And especially for DPS builds, after you get to a certain level of critical chance, it's more valuable just to get more crit severity instead of critical chance. And especially with the Endeavor system giving us a lot more extra passive stats, especially in critical chance, more and more of your builds are going to be starting to focus more on crit severity than actual critical chance inside those static things, especially at your higher end DPS builds that you might be looking at right now. Now, when it comes to more budget, thanks to a patch note, which I'll be referring to a bit in this video, back in July, Cryptic made a change in which all the consoles from the Jem'Hadar starships could be equipped on any starship. This isn't just the expensive Dominion console set, but also all the Jem'Hadar Vanguard consoles as well. So over here we have 2 of those Jem'Hadar Vanguard consoles, along with the Temporal Disentanglement Suite. This one can potentially give you another 10% critical severity if you have really high aux power. But realistically, for a lot of your energy builds, it's probably going to be, maybe 6 to 8% if it's aux as your secondary power after you have weapons at full power. As for Jem'Hadar Vanguard consoles, the power dispersal channel from the Vanguard warship gives you 10% crit severity, which is pretty nice. Its clicky is terrible, so don't ever use it, but the stats are pretty fine on its own, and there's no upgrading whatsoever. The link command matrix from the Vanguard carrier does summon a heavy attack craft on any starship now, not just on the Vanguard starships, but on any starship now, so that's fun for carrier builds. It also gives you some extra critical chance and whole HP as well. So that's something fun that you can add as well. So for number 7 in this list is the Timeline Stabilizer. It's been beaten out by another console, which we'll talk about in a moment right after this slide. But this is from an anniversary starship, which if you got it during the anniversary, then it was unlocked for your entire account. Or if you just had it slotted and didn't finish it, then it finished for you during these last couple of months. Because we've just been changing some stuff and wanting to get rid of that whole UI. If you didn't get it unlocked in some fashion through that account type method, then you have to get it through Phoenix Price Packs, which is from an Epic drop, which is pretty expensive and inconsistent to get. And it's also only a character unlock instead of account unlock. This console, like a lot of TPS players use this not really because of the passive stats at all of cooldown to science bridge officer abilities, but it's because it gives you a lot of fire and cycle haste and bridge officer recharge time stuff on the console itself. It does have a 3-piece flagship bonus with it, but the flagship consoles are not usable on starships outside of the 9 flagships in the game, so you're not really going to see that nice 2 and 3 set bonus on other starships. The next console also has a duration extender beyond 15 seconds, which is why it's better than this one. But outside of that, those circumstances, this is still a solid console. And if you look at the equivalent from the C-Store, the Temporal Trajectory Shifter, it's basically this console, but slightly weaker. And it's from the C-Store. I have no problems with this comparison. If we had more consoles in terms of comparisons like this, in which that we had a C-Store equivalent that was slightly weaker, but it was account unlocked versus something from some other method that's more expensive but better, but only single character, I would be totally okay with that. Because then for a lot of us that like me, for instance, who has over 20 characters that I try to play with inside of this game, it's kind of expensive to put out a lot to try to get something like this for all of my characters. So Being able to have something like the Temporal Treasury Shifter available to a lot of my captains is really nice to have. Also, the trade from these ships are also really good. A tier for tanks, but decent survival and a decent substitute for Honor Dead for KDF captains. Number 6, obviously, is the Domino console from the 8th anniversary, which was, anniversary pretty recently. This thing is insanely strong. That's just what it comes down to. Yeah, so I mean, like if you look at the raw stuff and look at the very bottom, it's fine. Like if it was basically a console that has better firing cycle, haste, plus damage and recharge, but it's only 10 seconds, then it's basically on par with the timeline stabilizer. The problem was they also added the part of, well, if you defeat something, then you can extend it by another 2 seconds, up to adding another 20 seconds to this thing, which means this thing can be up for 25% of the time. Up for 30 seconds and down for 90, and then up again for another 30. That's why this console is so strong. That is why on basically every energy build out there, even if it's not phaser, you see people slotting this console on there just because having a 30-second firing cycle haze plus bonus damage and cooldowns is insane and really helps round out a lot of your cooldowns on your starship if you happen to have this console. If you don't, there are some alternatives, but most of them are exclusive to particular starships and starship lines. The M6 computer from the Perseus Escort is the only one that I found that's really generally in the rough ballpark, outside of the consoles that are on number 7 in this list. It's a slightly weaker version that's only up for 15 seconds over the Domino console. Tactical System Stabilizer and Flagship Tactical Computer are still strong in their own right, but they're exclusive to their particular lines of starships. Tactical System Computer can only be used on the 31st Century Temple Ship Bundle starships, and the Flagship Tactical Computer can only be used on the 9 flagships inside of the game. But this is still a really strong console, and it's firing cycle haste for your entire team, so that's pretty nice to have too. Number 5 on this list is the Point Defense Bombardment Warhead. Now, this is in conjunction with the 2-piece bonus with the DPRM, which we'll cover in a few slides. But really, the reason why people use this console is because the 2-piece with the DPRM gives you 33% of a good chance for it to be an energy type that you're probably going to be using for your build. Plus, it's of the 3 other consoles with the DPRM, this is the one that gives the most damage. Now, the 25% projectile damage doesn't matter to most energy builds. What's nice is that this also enhances the clicky on this thing, which makes this clicky pretty powerful. So for an alternative, what we would be looking for is something that launches warheads, ideally, and also enhances energy damage, which we actually have in the game. Released a couple months ago was the Temporal Warship Bundle. Now, in my opinion, it's not worth it to get the full 4 starship set from that. Just getting the Jem'Hadar Vanguard version or the Romulan version is good enough, because you get all the versions of the trait and the console available to you. It just depends upon your faction as to what version that trait and console happens to be. Now, it's technically an EPG console. The thing is, though, the Quantum Bombardment does radiation damage that does scale from EPG. So this, like, you can basically think of this console as like the Point Defense with Bombardment Warhead, in that you've got some stats here that is enhancing the clicky. You have some stats here that is enhancing the clicky here as well. Additionally, alongside that, even though it doesn't have a 2 or 3 piece set bonus, it does give you 15% energy damage based upon your faction. So if you're a Federation captain, it gives you an extra 15% phaser, which is competitive with a lot of the universal phaser consoles on the exchange, by the way. If you're Klingon, it's 15% disruptor damage. If you're Romulan, it's 15% plasma damage. And if you're Dominion, it gives you 15% Polaron, which actually makes this a very strong console for science-based Dominion captains as well, because there are a lot of Polaron sets that enhance exotic and EPG type builds out there too. So this is a pretty powerful console for Science Dominion captains, but it's still a decent console regardless for other energy-based captains too. Number 4 is the Regenerative Integrity Field. This is from the Kabali Samsar Cruiser. This was the very first Tier 6 starship that I ever earned inside of the game. And it's a very solid, nice console. It gives you a strong instant heal, which is pretty close to what Miraculous Repairs does for engineering captains. A good way to look at why a lot of tanks anyway, especially when you see on STR why a lot of tanks will use this console, is because their tanks aren't engineers. Their tanks are typically tactical captains to do the most damage. And so they basically have this console to get a pseudo version of Miraculous Repairs on their starship as well. If you don't have this starship, you can easily just choose to be an engineer and choose the Grace Under Fire trait in one of your space traits to effectively have a better version of this console available to you for your clickies. Without the Grace Under Fire trait, this is an ability that's only usable every 4 minutes. With this clicky, you can potentially use it every 90 seconds. Or you can potentially use it twice in like less than 20 seconds if things get really, really dire. And I mean, like for PvE, this is generally going to be somewhat better especially for tactical captains. In PvP though, I really, really like this ability combined with this in that type of environment because you're taking a lot of damage ridiculously quickly. So that's why when I do space PvP, I typically do use an engineer, just because I get even more clicky and survival abilities for my captain. So it's much, much harder for me to die. Anyway, that's basically the cheap option for your Regenerative Integrity Field. I couldn't find any true consoles that had an instant self-heal available from the C-Store quite in the realm that the Regenerative Integrity Field could actually give you. So that's why I'm just defaulting to the engineering ability and the trait with that, because I know that a lot of you could do this if you're okay going with the engineering profession. Number 3, though, is the Protomatter Field Projector, and this is quite a powerful console. It's probably the best player-based AoE healing ability, frankly, in the game. It's so effective that it's effective without even speccing anything into healing in the game, and it's still good. This has been nerfed heavily over the years. When this thing started, its healing was much higher, and its PB AoE radius was 5 kilometers instead of 3 kilometers. Despite all of the nerfs to this console, it's still insanely good. So if you happen to have earned this thing, it's really, really great to have. As for the substitutes, we don't have any true substitutes for it, frankly, in the game. The 2 closest ones would be the Europa Battlecruiser's Overloaded Stiff Linkage and the Steam Rider Bundle's Resonance Cascade Modulator, at least for the budget and Spectrum things. There are a couple of ones that are from more expensive starships, but we're not talking about those in this video. Unfortunately, both of these consoles are Federation-only access. Additionally, the Steam Rider Bundles version is difficult to access on consoles. So just something to keep in mind. If you're a PC player, they're both generally easy to get if you're willing to pay the Zen for it. Console players, the Steam Rider Bundle is much, much more difficult to get. Number 2 is with the same thing that we talked about earlier, that Jem'Hadar consoles can be used on any starship. So this overpowered console can now be put on any starship as well. And this console, to put it simply, is the Tachyokinetic Converter for its passive stats, but it additionally has an extremely strong survival clicky on top of that passive crit chance, crit severity that you're adding to your starship. Additionally, if you add the other 2 pieces of the Jem'Hadar Vanguard, the Dominion console sets onto it, you get a lot of extra stuff too, an extra 20% damage, plus you get rid of the downside from this thing, so this thing can actually last the full 20 seconds. When it comes down to it, there's only one console that I can really think of that really matched to this. There are a couple of other ones, but they have a lot more restrictions than this one does, and that is the Secular Polarity Modulator. It's from the Prototype Walker. It's another similar console that only Federation and Federation-aligned Romulans can access. It's a very early access Reversal Polarity, though, that doesn't put Reversal Polarity on cooldown. Doesn't scale as well unless you spec a ton into tanking and healing in the game, which isn't most people, but at least from a more budget standpoint, it's a very strong substitute for it. So, and that's what this video is about. So, there's that for you. As I said on the Strongest Tanks video, this set is insanely strong to the point that if you can afford it, you can make almost any cruiser in the game a beast for tanking just by adding those 3 consoles onto it. The full Dominion 3-piece would add a ton of survival to it. The number one, of course, though, has to be the DPRM console. It's from the Prototype Dreadnought Cruiser, which is expensive for Federation captains. Klingon and Romulan captains can use a console pack off of the exchange instead of buying the Starship, which makes it way cheaper for them. Now, based on the time of the year, it can fluctuate anywhere between 3 and 12 million energy credits. I've seen it vary that much over just the past 12 months. So, and it's a cross-faction console pack. Federation captains also have a version of it too, but it doesn't have the DPRM in it. The Klingon one has this one and the shield projector. The Romulan one has this console plus this thing, which is an EPG type console, and the Federation's version of the cross-faction console pack for this is the shield and the EPG thing. The reason why this thing is so overpowered, frankly, is that it gives you passive damage. Its clicky is one of the best survival clickies in the game, and additionally, if you're above 80% HP, it also gives you an extra 40% bonus damage on top of that too. The fact that you have one of the best DPS consoles happen to be one of the best survival consoles too, in my opinion, is a little bit unfair inside of the game. But I'm not sure whenever they made this TOS for Starship set that they realized just how overpowered this console was. But it's been this way for years. They're probably not going to nerf it anymore at this point. Now, for a close alternative, I'm just going to preface this by saying, if there was a console which truly was close to this console, it wouldn't be a replacement. In that DPS players would just pick it up and add it alongside this console. So the alternative that I'm about to say isn't really a true alternative. It's just another console that does some of the things that this console is also doing. Namely, it's giving you damage and it's giving you some survival as well. And so this console I'm about to say does that as well. And it is from the C-Store. You do have to get the Jem'Hadar Vanguard Big Pack to unlock it though, because it is from one of the Jem'Hadar Tier 5 starships. And it's the Dominion Coordination Protocol. The Tier 6 version off the exchange has an enhanced console version that also gives you some passive stats, namely some extra passive damage. So it would match up even more to the DPRM if you had the Tier 6 version starship console. But it's still a great clicking nonetheless. It gives you extra damage, and it gives you flight turn rate, as well as a lot of immunities to movement types of things inside the game too. So it's a great console. It's not fully measuring up to DPRM, but frankly, nothing really can inside of this game. So that was the best that I could really do for some sort of alternative to this console. feel free to let me know what you think inside of the comments. For the rest of this video, I'm going to quickly talk about two things that I feel like I need to talk about in this video too. First off will be the Gamma Recruit rerun. So just for some TLDR for this, if you participated in this during Victory's life expansion during those first couple of weeks, you don't need to create another one. There's no new rewards from this. Even Kale mentioned this on Reddit, or was it on Twitter? He definitely mentioned it in one of those places that you don't get anything new from this rerun if you get another one. Basically, this is mainly for a lot of people who weren't available during that summer, that you have another chance to get a new Dominion Captain recruit essentially for this. Keep in mind as well, even though it runs for like these 3 weeks, you don't need to finish all the stuff during the 3 weeks. As long as you start a Dominion Captain during the event and get them through the tutorial, which the tutorial ends, by the way, after you defend Deep Space Nine and choose your faction. That's basically when the tutorial ends. So once you do that and exit to space, you finish that and the tutorial ends. As long as you do that before the end of the event, then you're good to go. Now there's a couple things you could do with this. Once you get an R&D school to level 15, you're able to claim an Aegis, a Research Development Duty Officer, which they're relatively hard to come by nowadays, frankly. You generally can't sell them on the exchange anymore. You can't sell Aegis officers in general on the exchange, and the only ways to get them is from recruitment events or through super random RNG through R&D recruitment duty officer projects. So they're pretty hard to get nowadays. The Aegis set isn't particularly strong. It's just that the Aegis set still has some really nice visuals that makes them desirable in that sense. Even though I used to use some back in the day when I was playing this game much earlier, when I didn't know what I was doing back then versus now, I use the Aegis set a lot. I now use it for visuals on some of my starships. Additionally, if you max out 3 Admiralty campaigns, you get another Epic Starship for all Epic Starship token for all of your starships. That's reusable. The big thing though for a lot of players anyway is going to be this officer right here. This is an officer. Once you get rank 4 and 6 duty officer categories, you're able to claim this officer for all of your captains, and this officer gives you an additional 10% damage versus everything. If you slot this in space or ground, you get that bonus to both space and ground. So generally, most people will put this officer in the ground duty officer slot, unless they're doing a ground DPS run or something. Then they'll temporarily slot it in the space part until that runs over, and then they'll switch it back to ground. There's also some stuff like there's a couple of improved specialization traits. The only one I think is worthwhile is Arrest, and that's because this is one of the best cooldown traits in the game for a lot of budget builds out there, especially ones that don't have a lot of good clicky consoles to help with cooldowns. Having that cooldown recharge time go from 25% to 30% is still going to be relatively substantial for a lot of budget builds out there, just the way that it works. If you're not in the budget build realm, you're probably not going to use Arrest. You'll probably just use like Improved Attack Officer if you're a science captain, for instance. Now, the reason why they're doing the Gamma Recruit thing right now is because they're adding the lifetime Veteran Destroyer finally to Jem'Hadar captains. It took them over a year to do it. Now, some of the sad things, they're only adding the Tier 6 Jem'Hadar Vanguard Veteran Destroyers. They're not adding Tier 5 ones as well, so that is one Admiralty card down for Dominion Captains, by the way. For those that happen to have the lifetime subscribership thing inside this game. Versus the other Veteran Destroyers, and the reason why I didn't do a starship comparisons for this ship is because it's basically just like the other Veteran Destroyers, except it's got a little bit less HP, a little bit more shields, and it's got the Vanguard Wind Weapon mechanic, which is basically in line with the other Vanguard starships for the Jem'Hadar in this game. They generally have a little bit less hull and a little bit more shields, and they have the wingman mechanics, so they technically could slightly out DPS the other versions of things out there, with everything else being equal. There's also the Jem'Hadar Vanguard uniform as well, which you're adding with this too. Yes, I am making another Jem'Hadar captain to fly this thing, but that's really mainly because I already have one of my accounts that has lifetime anyway. So I'm going to get that captain, and then I'm going to have him fly in this just to see how it well, not necessarily how it feels, because I know how a Vanguard or how a Veteran Destroyer feels, but I'm going to fly around to see how it looks anyway, with like the transformations and such. I would guess Zeph Films is probably going to do a couple of his videos on this ship as well. Whether this stirs people's minds or not, you could probably just see how much his view count is and how it starts to grow or not as to whether it's popular. As for claiming stuff for the various recruits, I'm going to be showing you for both Federation, Klingons, and Realm Republic the 3 different spaces for that, because you might get lost trying to find those things. So I'm just going to show you how to get to those. For Federation, just go to Earth, which is the Sol system. You can transport there, or you can use the map to get there. And then you go there, and then you dock, and then you beam down onto the space station. And on the map itself, luckily this one's labeled. The other ones in the game typically aren't, but luckily this one is. You start at the transporter. There's a couple of different services around there. But the thing is that we're trying to go to the temporal agent to claim our rewards. So essentially, like after you earn some of your rewards on your Gamma recruit, your other characters on your account can also claim some of those rewards too. If it was just some experience, then it's probably not going to be too much. If it's something like the duty officers, they'll be able to claim those as well after you've earned them on that particular recruit character. So on Earth Space Dock, just go ahead and turn left here right after you beam in, and then just go around this thing. And over here on the left is going to be the temporal agent himself. If you go down the stairs here and just turn around, this is where the Bridge Officer Trainer is. For those of you that are curious, that's where you can get a lot of the general Bridge Officer abilities in the game, besides a couple of the ones that are from lockbox, or some of the tier 3 ones are only available from crafting. So that means some of them are going to be on the exchange. If you go over to this guy, as long as you're a level 20 captain or you've played 20 hours on a Jem'Hadar captain, you'll be able to access the rewards there, and then you'll be able to choose from the various recruits that you've done stuff for. I did miss the temporal recruit by 24 hours, by less than 24 hours in fact, so I don't have temporal recruit as one of the tabs here. But I did participate in Delta and Gamma previously, so I do have those 2 tabs there. If Gamma Recruit is going to be your first recruitment event, then after you start doing stuff with Gamma Recruit, that's going to be the only tab that is here. If you have earned absolutely nothing, then you won't even be able to click that tab itself, just the way it is. So for Klingons, the place you go to is Kronos First City. So you just go to the Kronos system, either directly or you can go ahead and transport there. You'll need to move a little bit in order to get into range. It's not like Earth or Neuramas, in which you can beam down almost immediately. You do have to move a little bit here in order to beam down. Whenever you beam down, as you can see here on the map, it's not as labeled and fancy as the Federation Earth Space Dock. Then again, that Space Dock map has had several updates and revisions entirely, while the Klingon one has had one map, and that's basically been it. You start at the transporter area. There are a couple of amenities around there, especially if you want to do, for instance, do officer training or go to sick bay, go to the exchange or bank, go to the tailor. They all are around there. At the security officer, you can also turn in dead tribbles alongside, the regular contraband and turning in prisoners. Well, what we're interested in today, obviously, is going to the temporal agent. So after you exit the transporter area, which on the map is like right here off the screen, you want to go into this area here, which is the Great Hall. And then on this screen, there's a lot of diplomats, people just walking around because it's a big map, and Crypto doesn't want you to feel alone and sad and such, so there's a lot of NPCs walking around. This is our temporal agent right here. You just go up to him and you do the same process. For Romulans, it's a little bit different only because, I mean, you could easily do the go to the Federation or Space Dock if you're a Federation allied, or if you're a Klingon allied, you could go to Kronos First City. Or you can go to the Romulan Flotilla. This officer is not available at New Romulus Command. It's only at the Romulan Flotilla. So to get there, you do have to go here on the map. There is a New Romulus system, obviously that's actually pretty close, so if you wanted to transwarp, you would transwarp to New Romulus, to New Romulus right here, and then go into sector space and just fly the rest of the way normally over to the Romulan Flotilla. Whenever you get to that spot on the map, you'll click Enter Flotilla. There isn't a second map you need to go into before you can beam down to where you need to go. You literally just beam onto that starship itself. Now this map is actually pretty small, so I don't really need to go into too much in depth as to what's going on here. I mean, there's sick bay, there's the Taylor, officer training is just all right next to each other. Right here is where you do starship switching and such, especially for early levels when you're not going to be at New Romulus Command. Then the exchange and bank is over here alongside the temporal agent. So we're going to be wandering over there. In my opinion, it's a little bit easier to wander this way down by the Taylor and over. You could easily wander this way through this doorway, past the shipyard essentially, and then over to the temporal agent. There is this elevator here as well, but that's only used for a couple of missions effectively in the Romulan storyline. You could still go up there and talk to that mission giver as well if you so choose, but you don't really have anything really to do up there. So we're going to wander over by this second doorway because this one's the elevator. Then going through that doorway, we'll turn left and then go down and turn right just before sickbay. And then we'll go past the Taylor, which is behind these boxes here, and go into this doorway. And as we go through this doorway, we'll be able to see our temporal friend just right here. Then if you want to wander over to him, you'll be able to click this, and then boom, you'll be able to see all of your stuff just right here. There's a good chance as you're going, if you're leveling a new Romulan captain, that you'll probably encounter this guy before you're level 20, so you'll see that error of, no, you gotta wait until you level 20 before you can claim my stuff. But yeah, he is there in case y'all are curious. In terms of some stuff that I think has been long overdue, frankly, first off is the TOS Temporal Recruitment event. First off, because Critical Systems is a really nice starship trait. It gives you 3% crit chance and 50% crit severity from activating emergency power to X, Y, or Z ability. Weapons, shields, engines, auxiliary, any of that stuff, it would give you additional 10 or 15% crit severity, which is nice. Additionally, though, the bigger thing is that when you got all reputations to rank 5, which is why I really am sad that I missed out on this, was that all of your reputation equipment, whatever you would make them thereafter after doing this, is that they would start at ultra rare rarity Mark 13 instead of the standard very rare Mark 12 that a lot of other equipment would start at. Basically, if you're not going to do elite missions in the game, ultra rare is perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. Also keep in mind a lot of your stuff from your fleet starts at ultra rare rarity as well. Also, there's an Aegis Duty Officer that you can earn, and then if you do the DOF category thing with this recruit that you can't start right now, you're able to get a duty officer that gives you a lot of extra experience and expertise, which is, if you're trying to get one of these types of officers on the exchange, they are extremely expensive. They're some of the most expensive duty officers in the entire game. So just for that to put in context. Additionally, I kind of wish they would add the featured episode replay stuff back again, either adding them back or just adding these items and bridge officers into the Phoenix store. I mean, we did recently see the EMH officers added to the Phoenix store, so it would be nice if they did something like this or just added these replay events back in. Considering that 3 of the 4 arcs that this comes from, well, aren't exactly prominent in the mission journal anymore. I really doubt they'll do another featured episode replay ever again in this game. Instead, we have featured TFOs now that they kind of do instead. The reason why I really want this, by the way, is for the Shard of Possibilities. It is one of the best ground devices in the entire game, and because of all the new characters and new things that they've done. Basically, if you started a Dominion captain or you started a Discovery Federation captain, you have like there is no way you'd be able to have Shard of Possibilities in your ground slots, because there hasn't been a replay event since those expansions came out. So yeah, so for the last thing in this video, there's some stuff with feature TFOs and buyouts things, which was a little confusing to me. Just because it was noted here that those that had previously played these last couple of featured TFOs could have a buyout option to finish them off, which is weird. I thought they said that they would that those would autocomplete, but perhaps maybe it was the events prior to those ones, and they're trying to suck some more money out of us for these particular things. The other thing that's a little disturbing is that if you didn't participate in the event at all, it sounds like they aren't even letting you use Zen to buy those old feature TFO items. From a business standpoint, I think it would be smarter just to let people pay full price and get some of those old ones, like the Prior's World Defense Satellite, which is a really great value console, frankly, for everyone besides extremely high-end DPS captains. But that's just my personal rant. There are some other things in the patch notes. You can feel free to see that link if you so choose. It's not by Ambassador Kale, so I'm not sure if that means anything at all going forward. But yeah, feel free to like and subscribe if you like this type of content. Again, I don't really put out content more than like once or twice a week max. So if you subscribe, you're not going to be bombarded by tons and tons of videos throughout the week. Yeah, feel free to comment as well. Like, are you excited about the new Jem'Hadar Veteran Destroyer that's added to the game? Are you excited by that new uniform? And how do you feel about our current featured TFO right now? Feel free to let me know in the comments, and also feel free to let me know any other questions that you have about the game as well. I am not a DPS captain, and I'm really not qualified to answer those types of questions, but if it's with anything else in the game, I can probably answer it, or at least lead you in the right way into being able to answer those questions for yourself. Thanks for watching, everyone.